Alright. We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, youth baseball coaches, youth parents, and I know some youth baseball players listening to this. Welcome to this week's episode. Welcome 80-20 Baseball community, where we first and foremost focus on getting really good at the 20% of things that we can do out there on the practice field, in our training environment, and the batting cages during the games that will net us 80+% of our success. We dive into the details within those big needle movers, and we touch on the other stuff too along the way, but we are sure to allocate our time accordingly. This week's episode, I will dive into a peer-to-peer, player-to-player, teammate-to-teammate strategy tip that we can use throughout the season and its two significant benefits. And we have part one of our interview with Nick Gore. Nick and I went to grade school together, high school together. He was the starting first baseman. I was a starting pitcher in the Southern California Championship game back many years ago. Nick went on to play college baseball at some different levels, including the Division I level, and he played professionally with the Tampa Bay Rays in their minor league system. But more importantly, Nick has been heavily involved in the youth baseball world for the last 10 years with his two boys, who are now teenagers, and I thought Nick was a perfect guest to bring on to share out his insights that we can learn from to be better youth baseball coaches, youth baseball parents, etc. It's the trifecta. Somebody that I go back 30 years with, back to grade school, somebody who played college ball, professional baseball, but has spent the last 10 years in the youth baseball world. Somebody's going to give us some really good insight over the next 3 episodes. We'll have part one of the interview today. We're going to come out swinging. We're going to go right into hitting. And in fact, part one, the entire 30 minutes, it's going to be heavy on the hitting. Now, before we dive into that, I have a peer-to-peer, player-to-player, teammate-to-teammate strategy that we can use throughout the season. And here it is. I recommend, and this is a suggestion, I'm just throwing it out there. This may not be something first-year coaches have the time to get to or the focus to get to, but if it's your second or third year, this is something you can test out and try out. Keep it simple and be careful not to bite off more than you can chew. Better to follow through and get it done. My suggestion is to have the players get up in front of their teammates and speak to their teammates with regard to something that they have shown to be successful at or have success with. Essentially, taking the role of a coach. You give them the stage, 3 to 5 minutes, no more than 5, ideally 3 minutes, not a long time, but enough for them to share out a few of their main tips and to articulate what they're thinking and their thought process behind something that they're doing successfully, whether that's hitting, base running, catching fly balls, pitching, catching, getting out of a pickle, or it could be something else that they're successful with that might not even be related to the game of baseball. Maybe they're really good at something that the other players are also interested in, like surfing or video games. There are multiple goals behind doing this. Of course, getting in front of their peers and getting up in front of people and speaking is a skill that only gets better with practice and will be a skill that is helpful in life. Having players become the teacher will help solidify their understanding of it. Having players listening to their teammates, or in this case, listening to a teammate, speak about what they're doing as a hitter, as a pitcher, as an infielder, as an outfielder, as a base runner, or something cerebral that they're doing really well on the field. Maybe they always know where to go with the ball. This is an awesome way for players to hear their teammates share out from their level, from their perspective. And I think that connection is twofold. One, they hear it being explained from somebody their age level, so there's a better chance of it connecting. It gives them a new voice to listen to, a different perspective. It also sets the tone that they should be open to learning from each other, that they should be willing to learn from each other and not just the coaches. It highlights players' strengths. Now, the challenge with doing this, here are the challenges. Finding something for every single player to talk about and then giving them some pointers and being very clear on how much time they have. Say, hey, you have 3 minutes, doesn't have to be long. I'd like you to cover a few main points. What's your best tip for your teammates to be better at that skill or action or situation? I would request that the players speak confidently, but also in a humble way. And you may even recommend that they practice this speech with their families as prep I would have a timer. I would say, hey, I'll tell you when you have 1 minute left. And then I would do it at the end of practice or at the beginning of practice, once a week for each player. So if your season is shorter or longer than that, you can adjust accordingly. This has a lot of benefits. It allows the coaches to hear the different perspectives of these things that are going on during the game, during practice, what the players thinking when they're hitting, pitching, playing defense, what the players on your team are thinking when they're on the bases, why they think they're successful with it. And the icing on the cake is if the other players can take a nugget of wisdom from their teammate and use it to better their game. So it's a life skill. Public speaking, getting up in front of their peers and explaining something. And also, there's that message we've probably all heard before that goes like this. Well, if it's so easy, you get up here and teach it. Well, if you think it's easy, you teach it. Or if you think being the coach is easy, you get up here and be the coach. So, of course, that's not something we want to say. But with that said, when players get up there and they have to explain and teach something to their teammates, albeit just 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, I think they'll have a better appreciation overall for you as a coach and the coaching staff. Might just be slightly, but when they have to stand up there in your shoes as a coach, they may better see the challenges that you go through as a coach and that it is an easy street being a coach. So there's a lot of benefits here. As a coach, you could survey the players and ask them if there's something they would like to speak about. You could tell them, hey, I'd love you to talk about this. I'd love you to talk about that. You could distribute out the topics based on what you see as a coach. You could do it different ways, but some peer coaching, some player-to-player coaching, some teammate-to-teammate coaching has a lot of benefits. It shows that the coaches trust the players to teach themselves, and there's other benefits of this, but you get my drift. I would make sure that they know it's a tight window. They don't have to get up there for that long. They need to be concise and clear, prepared with 3 or 4 bullet points. I would tell them they have 3 to 5 minutes. 5 minutes is firm. They're going to be cut off at 5 minutes. Give them a 1 minute warning if they're at 4 minutes. I suggest having one player each week present a topic, something they're successful at, something they've shown to be more successful than the average player, that they've shown to be more successful at than the average player for their age, or more successful on average than their teammates. And I would recommend to the players that they present it confidently, but also in a humble way. So that's my peer-to-peer, player-to-player, teammate-to-teammate tip strategy you can think about using. Maybe this isn't something for first-year coaches. You already have a lot on your plate. But those of you that are in your second or third year, you have your roster, say 12 kids, you could just write out, boom, boom, boom. If you're not sure, you go up to them and say, hey, or email their parents, say, hey, is there a topic? Is there something that they do really well, maybe better than others, that they would like to speak to or talk about? Maybe they're a good cook. I know it's not baseball related, but finding 12 things on the baseball field, finding 12 different things on the baseball field for each one to get up and talk about might be a challenge. You definitely could have 2 or 3 players talk about hitting. You could have a couple different players talk about pitching and their success as a pitcher and what they're doing and what they've done to get to where they're at. And maybe a tip or 2 for their teammates that their teammates might not already be using. You could do the same thing for base running, defense, outfield play, knowing the game. And if you run out of things, you could talk video games, cooking, or surfing, or skateboarding, etc. All right, now we are going to dive into the interview with Coach Gore, G-O-R. Coach Gore is going to talk about hitting, and he's going to share out what he thinks are some of the most important things youth hitters need to do to be successful. With that said, let's dive into part 1 of the interview. All right, 80/20 baseball community. I'm here with a grade school friend, a high school friend, somebody I've known for a long time, and somebody that I see eye to eye with. Nick is one of those few people in my life that's as tall as I am. Really excited to have my friend Nick Gore on, and Nick's going to give you a little background on himself, and including his playing career and up through coaching his boys as they've made their way through youth baseball. Nick, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on and being part of this.
I'm excited to have you on. I thought you had a lot of good stuff to share with the youth baseball community. So maybe we just start off by having you give the listeners a summary of your backstory and how you've made your way through baseball, coaching, playing.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were telling your listeners there, you and I have known each other for a while, all the way back from pre-high school days. Obviously, we did the whole Little League and All-Stars and Tournament of Champions and all that stuff. As we got older, we played at a very competitive high school here in Southern California. We were CIF Division I champions in the toughest league and the toughest division in Southern California. So you and I got the opportunity to do that. And as we progressed through our high school career, I turned into getting drafted out of high school with the Colorado Rockies. I ended up doing a draft and follow ago, went to Cypress Junior College for a year, ended up breaking my hand during the off season or preseason, redshirted there, and then moved to Saddleback Junior College for 2 years. From there all the way to Oklahoma, played at Oral Roberts University, and then came back and finished my baseball career as far as college goes over at Cal Baptist. When I was at Cal Baptist, I was a fifth-year senior and then signed as a fifth-year senior as a free agent with the Tampa Bay Rays. Went on to play, minor league baseball in the California leagues out here, all the way up to the high A level. And then after that, my baseball career got cut short as far as playing goes at that point. So that's just a real brief summary of my background, playing from high school all the way through college, high school Division I, NCAA, and then a little bit of professional time as well.
Nick set a school record for home runs. And Nick was the starting first baseman when we played at Dodger Stadium our junior year. Just want to throw that out there. He's played at a higher level there and then going to some great colleges, Oral Roberts, Cal Baptist, Cypress Junior College. For those of you that aren't familiar with maybe those programs, those are really good, high quality baseball colleges. And then playing professional baseball, getting to play with the Rays, and then also drafted by the Rockies out of high school. So that says a lot. Now, Nick, you made your way the last chunk of years into the youth baseball community with your boys. What has been your role in youth baseball? You've done some coaching. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah. So obviously with the path that I took, I wanted to be involved with the coaching. At first, I wanted to sit back and be like, I want my boys to go out there and get coaching from someone else and just allow them to be a kid on the team with coaches around them and not having a dad that played at a high level constantly on the field with them and having that pressure on them. But as they progressed and got a little bit older, I could tell that they were getting frustrated with the coaching. And on the flip side, I started to get a little bit frustrated with the coaching and the organizations that they were being a part of. Next thing you know, taking over not just one team, but both of my boys playing in those programs when they were 10 and 8. And then from then, I've coached every team that they've ever played on from that point all the way up until now they're 15 and 14. And obviously not coaching at the high school level, but helping out with the high schoolers with the travel ball program that's associated with the team that they're working with right now. So I've been involved with the little leagues and I've been involved with travel ball for the past 10 plus years at this point.
So you've seen every level. That's pretty cool. So you got a really good understanding of things. And so I want to dive in. I know we got on the phone a while back and you were sharing with me some thoughts on the youth baseball and I thought, wow, I love your outlook on this. I like how you're looking at it. You're not just like, well, this is how we learned, or not just going in naive. You've been around. And so you come in with a nice view, a high level view of things. And so your take on it was really interesting. And I think I just stopped the conversation. I'm like, Nick, I got to have you come on the podcast and share out some of your thoughts on this. So why don't we dive in? The first question, and I know you played professionally as a pitcher, you got drafted as a pitcher, but you can swing the bat. I know you understand hitting, and I want to get your thoughts on what are some of the more common youth swing flaws that you've seen, and what can hitters, coaches do to avoid those?
One of the things that I see that kids really struggle with is how to start their swing, especially at the younger age. They don't have a good understanding of how their bodies and mechanics work. So in their mind, a lot of the youth players, and we're talking the kids at 8, 9, 10, up to 12 years old, are still even struggling with this. They're starting their swings for the most part with their upper bodies. In their mind, swinging a bat is all upper body, hands, and everything from that point of view. And when you start doing, that's when everything gets, I always call it like unplugged, where they're not connected to their body, they're not connected to the ground, and they're definitely not using their legs through the swing. That's where you start seeing the long swings or kids pulling off the ball or the front side pulling out or the head pulling out. All the common flaws that people see, but they don't necessarily know how to correct or understand what's really going on. The biggest reason is because their swings are starting and being generated with the upper half of their body and not from the ground up.
With regard to that flaw, they're unplugged with their start. Is there something like a tip or two that you would have for coaches that you've used that's worked well with you and your hitters and your kids?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to do drills, and we'll get into this on the pitching side too, where we break down the swing. And like I said, again, we're trying to keep it at a very simple level. And that was one of the things that I actually had when I first started coaching, had a difficult time with, because again, I played at a high level. I came from that world, now all of a sudden having to come all the way back. And how do I relate to an 8-year-old, or how do I relate what I've learned at that level all the way down to a youth baseball? So what we really had to do is just break down a lot of parts of the swings and get them in situations where they're pulling their hips and they're moving their hips is the first part of the movement. One of the drills that I like to do with the boys is I call it, it's a take one, rake one, where we teach them how to actually take a pitch and start the swing with their lower half and their lower part of the body before their hands even start with the swing. That way they can start with the lower half, the hands stay back, and then they take the pitch that's coming no matter matter if it's a ball or a strike. Then the next ball that they hit, again, they do that same motion, start with the lower half, and then have the hands catch up and start that swing. When you do that drill, it teaches them one of two things. One, how to take what we like to call active takes, where they're looking to actually hit the ball until it's like every pitch is a strike, and I'm going to hit every pitch until it's a ball. Versus on the flip side, a lot of the kids, when they get into these games, are so afraid of swinging at bad pitches, they wait way too long to realize that the pitch is a strike before they even start their swing. So it helps on both sides of that. It helps them get used to starting their swing with their backside, but it also helps them start the process of what they're doing in their swing progression to be ready to hit every single pitch that's there until it's a ball versus, okay, now it's a strike. Okay, now I need to swing, helping to flip that philosophy a little bit.
Yeah. I love the name Take One, Rake One.
Yeah, take one, rake one.
I like how it rhymes. It's catchy and that sort of thing. I think naming your drills so kids know how to dive into it. They know what's expected. They know how to set it up. I think that helps. We're going to do Take One, Rake One, and they know, boom, okay, what's the expectation? They can get ready for it. And I love the name of it. When you're coaching youth baseball, being creative with those things. And I love the active take idea. And so it's interesting. You tied it together very nicely there with the swing. And so you hear a lot of, hey, I have my players take a pitch or have them take one and see a pitch, see one first, but you want the lower half really working because you were saying a lot of the problem is the upper half starts doing more of the swing, or at least too early and too much with youth baseball players. So to get the lower half more active and engaged and ready and leading the way, that you're doing these active takes. And it makes me think of you hear, and I know you've heard this, the kind of the yes, no approach of hitting versus the no, yes, right? It's a lot easier to go from I'm swinging till I'm taking, then I'm taking, I'm swinging. Oh, that ball's by me. I think that makes a lot of sense. I like the active takes.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it right on the head with the yes, no versus I call it, again, we're hitting every pitch until it's a ball, right? Every pitch is a hittable ball until it's not, right? Which is what goes in line with the yes, no.
Physiologically, it can be no other way. It takes no time to not swing, right? You don't need to catch up to anything if you're not swinging. But if you are going to decide to swing and you do it late, that swing does have to go through a certain path and it's going to take a certain amount of time. And now, again, tenths of a second here, but still, that's the difference between missing it and not hitting it. So I think you can't do it any other way than that. And the more I talk to hitting coaches, guys who are good hitters like yourself growing up, the more I see that's just the way you have to do it. That's one of those absolutes. And there's definitely not a lot of absolutes with coaching, but I think one of those, like you said, how you teach your kids is like you're swinging until it's a ball, not waiting to see the pitch and where's it go and then decide. I'm deciding to swing until determined otherwise. Right.
Yeah. And what you see a lot of times too is I'll make this, not argument, but I'll make this point that when the boys are hitting in batting practice, for the most part, it doesn't matter where the pitch is, they're typically swinging and they're typically making contact. Even if it's a borderline pitch or slightly out of the zone, they're so in a mindset that coach is going to throw me a good pitch that I'm going to hit every pitch that he throws because coach throws strikes and I'm here for batting practice. And they have a lot of success because in their mind now, batting practice is I'm going to hit every pitch because every pitch that coach throws is a strike, right? Or if I get into the cages, every pitch that the machine throws is a strike. So I'm going to be ready to hit. But as soon as kids get into the game, for some reason, there's a disconnect with that thought process. And then it goes, okay, wait till he throws a strike and then swing, right? And the kids that are doing that are the ones that are taking, and that's why you see kids consistently take good pitches for strikes, is because their thought process on their approach is backwards once it gets into the game. And it's not like they don't see that pitch is coming. They recognize, oh yeah, that's a strike, boom, and they take it because again, their thought process was so backwards that, okay, I'm not going to swing until this pitch is a strike. By the time they're landed and loaded, that whole sequence has happened way too late and they physically can't pull the trigger at that point. It's just impossible. Versus like you were talking about, if I'm ready to hit, it's easier for me to shut my swing down than it is to get my swing going.
Yep. The indication that hitters are doing this well, their approach is on and that they are in the actively taking pitches and their mindset is as you described. Good indication of this that we can see as coaches, how many check swings or how many partial swings, how many times are they taking pitches, but their hands are coming forward a little bit. Of course, not a full swing, right? But hard check swing, that really aggressive check swing. I think that's a good indication. And now I'm not saying every pitch, but the more of those you see, I truly believe that means that the hitter's up there actively looking to swing until otherwise.
Right. Absolutely. And that's a great indication of it. And it's easily to tell when a kid is actively taking because again, one, and even at the younger age, maybe again, their hands are coming at the same time, creating that separation. It starts becoming higher level stuff. But if we can get the youth kids, and I see it all the time, and it's frustrating. They'll take that pitch and there's just no movement from the body at all, right? They've landed like I'm going to hit it, but they'll take that pitch almost sometimes like either backing out of the box or standing up before it's even across the plate. They've already given up on that pitch. Next thing you know, it's a strike because in their mind, either they didn't see it right or for whatever reason, they just weren't ready to hit. And that's one of the more frustrating things is because to me, that means they just flat out weren't ready to hit that pitch. Mm-hmm. And youth coaches see it all the time. They'll see kids, as soon as that pitch is thrown, they'll either one, maybe because they have a little bit of fear of getting hit, which is obviously a very common problem and a very big fear in youth baseball, but just the kids giving up on pitches way too early. And then again, not being able to pull the trigger because they gave up on it. And if we can get them in a position where they're actively looking to do damage with the bat every single time that ball's thrown to them, that fixes a lot of problems. And then what kids don't realize is once they start doing that, the game slows down for them, right? Those pitchers that are throwing harder, they get to catch up to because they're looking to hit versus waiting to see if it's a strike. Again, you know how it is. The timing from when the ball leaves the pitcher's hand to when it gets to home plate is only a few tenths of a second. And at the 12-year-old level, if you have a kid that's throwing upper 60s, whatever that equates to, I mean, that's 90 plus in the big leagues, right? We have youth kids hitting at 12, 11, 10 years old, having the same amount of time to identify a pitch as big leaguers do, right? And then we're asking them, why did you take that pitch? Or why are you taking strikes? You hear the coaches complain and parents, you should be doing better and this and that. And it's like, well, they're not realizing that they have the same amount of time at that age as big leaguers do. And we're asking a 12-year-old who's not even close to developed into his body to do something that professional athletes are doing. And that's hitting the baseball, which is the hardest thing to do in any sport. Like hands down, not even close, doesn't compare to anything. So it's hard. And that's what a lot of, I guess, parents and coaches don't understand. I mean, baseball is a game of failure. You fail majority of the time and you're a superstar, which is the only sport that equates to. And on the flip side, it's mentally tough for the kids because again, in youth sports, maybe play once a week, twice a week, whatever it is. You maybe get 4 or 5 at-bats and you go 0 for 5 for the week and you don't get another at-bat for another 2 or 3 days. That sits with you, right? And it's frustrating. It's not like you get to get back out there like when you're in college or even pro ball and like, hey, I went 0 for 4 today. No big deal. Tomorrow's a new day, right? You have to now sit with that for 3 or 4 days before you get another opportunity to get back out there and recorrect that. And it's one of the most mentally defeating processes of the game is hitting because it's so frustrating.
Yeah. And dealing with the failure, I know there's a lot of discussion about how we can teach kids to deal with failure. I know as you get into the college level and pro level, there's a lot of that. The mental game is pushed out a lot more and rightfully so. But I always wonder if we spent a little more time on avoiding failure. And to say that we can't avoid failure or reduce failure, I think is putting our head in the sand because like what you're saying about hitting here and the advice you're sharing will, if done right and practiced and coached up correctly, almost every kid will fail a little less than they would have otherwise. And maybe in some cases, they will fail a lot less. They may go from somebody who hits the ball hard 10% of the time at the plate to somebody who hits it hard 30 or 40% of the time at the plate at the youth level. So we can sit here and talk about how to deal with failure, which is a good one. But why don't we reduce the failure up there? And by being ready to hit and assuming the pitch is going to be a good pitch to hit and ready to go, then inherently going to reduce the amount of failure. So sometimes I think we overcoach how to deal with failure. And again, that's a big part of life. I love that idea. I'm not saying not to coach it, but I think sometimes we also need to be a little more aggressive on the how do we avoid failure, also the combination of the two. And I would say this, Nick, about the youth hitters having the same amount of time on the pitch, right? So like a 12-year-old pitcher, like you described, just like you described, throwing upper 60s, that's very comparable to the amount of time that pitch is going to take to get to the plate, to the catcher's glove, as it would at the major league level because of the mound distance, right? So I would actually say that they probably have less time to commit to the pitch because I would say the major leaguer swinging their bat is much faster than the average 11-year-old, 10-year-old, definitely like an 8-year-old getting that bat going because the swing and just how fast those guys swing, like just the hips and the boom, they swing that bat so much faster because they're bigger and just muscular and stronger. Yeah, it's about the same amount of time, but I thought, man, Corey Seager swings that bat way faster. I mean, you see slow-mos like that of him when Corey Seager, the pitch is coming. I was watching one the other day and it's like that pitch is not very far from the plate and he hasn't even started his swing. But you do that with the average pitch at a youth level, even the best youth hitter is probably not going to get the bat there because they don't have the core and muscular and leg strength and hip strength and the fire through and get to that pitch that fast. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. They flat out just don't have the athletic ability to make that decision and be successful at that point. And that's why a lot of times when you watch the Little League World Series on TV or see kids, and again, the Little League World Series on TV, obviously you have 13 hitters on a team that are the best hitters in that league. But outside of it, when they're playing in the regular league, when you got a kid on the mound, and I've been fortunate to have a couple pitchers that can absolutely bring it at that level, it's complete domination. The kids get frustrated. And really at that point, I say, guys, like, you don't understand what you're doing. Yeah, he's throwing 65 or 68 miles an hour, which he's bringing it for a 12-year-old. I mean, that's just cheddar for those guys. But what they don't understand is, guys, I mean, you have, was it 0.3 of a second or less from the time that it leaves his hand till it hits the catcher's left at a 95 mile an hour baseball in big league or whatever that number equates to. These poor kids get defeated and say, hey, like, this is, again, now you're really learning how absolutely insanely difficult this game is. And then what gets taken for granted is a lot of people don't realize when you have these good hitters, even at a young age, like that talent, it's indescribable, right? To be able to do something like that and be successful consistently it gets taken for granted. And that's why even when I watch sports highlights or whatever it is, I can watch basketball guys hit 3-pointers all day long or watch football guys throw touchdowns, but it's not exciting. But when you show me a little medley of dudes hitting bombs in the big leagues, I'll never get tired of watching that. You know, I will never get tired of seeing guys just absolutely rake, because I know how incredibly difficult that is. And for those guys to make that look so easy is just phenomenal.
Yes. And that makes me think of another reason why youth hitters should even be more conscientious and prioritize starting on time. Like you're talking, being active, ready to hit. The fact that the major league players have a much greater, I mean, they have a database of pitches they've seen that's terabytes of pitches they've seen since they were little. So they can adapt to a pitch into different areas much faster because they've seen tens of thousands and maybe if not 100,000 pitches. Or a youth hitter, they don't have nearly that much in the experience department when it comes to pitches. What I mean is, you think of the strike zone, right? The major league strike zone is like over 400 square inches. So the youth baseball strike zone will be smaller up from knee to the top of the zone. But width-wise, it's definitely wider at the youth level.
Definitely.
So some of these umpires will give you a foot. So I would say it's not too much difference. You're talking hundreds of square inches to cover. And so I think that hitters need a little bit more time to adapt their swing, maybe a little bit more time to get there, to react to like that location. I know that's not as big a deal as actually just getting the swing going, but definitely I really like what you're saying about that part of prioritizing, getting the kids to start on time, getting them going. And if they're going to do an active take. And I want to say this, and I want your thoughts. The two things I think that should be coached up the most is being on time, which is what we're talking about now. Yes. Being on time. And then I think the next part is pitch selection. So if you can be on time, and pitch selection doesn't need to be perfect pitches, but just like not swinging at pitches in the dirt and just really reducing the amount of poor pitches you swing at that really you can't do much with at all, or you even make contact. I think being on time and then getting the hitters to really understand, getting a better idea, more discipline on their zone. And then with 2 strikes, the strike zone. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think you hit it right on the head. And I was actually going to get to that part of that active take and that whole sequence. And one of the biggest flaws is you hit it right on the head is being on time, right? Being on time is so important for these kids because again, if they're not put down in a position to strike at that point, and if they're late in that sequence, again, they don't have the ability to pull the trigger, right? I need to be foot down, hands separated, creating separation. Obviously, if we go deeper into creating separation with the upper body and the hands and the lower half, but I need to be foot down in a locked position, ready to go on time. And what kids don't understand, and this is one of the things in youth baseball that I really struggle with, especially in the little league world, is they're not allowed to have an on-deck hitter. So how is a kid who's 10, 11, 12 years old, who is facing a kid throwing 65 plus miles an hour, supposed to get his timing down when he's not allowed to be on deck? Yeah. And that blows my mind. It's like, oh, we want to have safety for the kids because one kid got hit with a foul ball who knows how many years ago, and now we can't have an on-deck hitter for little league for ages under 12 years old. And I said, now you're asking a 12-year-old who's still coming into his own playing recreational baseball to go up there without any type of timing mechanism. Mm-hmm. When do I get my foot down? When do I need to be in locked position so I have some timing so I can be on time? You're asking a kid to go basically from the dugout right to the batter's box and to be ready to hit at a very high level. So I see a huge problem with kids being on time because of the fact that they don't have the ability to have an on-deck circle in that position. Then as the kids get older, I think what happens too is they don't know how to be on deck or the reason why they're on deck, right? And so now we have to teach the kids, even at the older older age, hey, this on deck circle is your pre-planning for your at bat. So instead of turning around and talking to the guys in the dugout and not paying attention and having a good time, like you should be getting loose, getting ready to swing, but 2, absolutely working on your timing to time up the pitcher so you can be on that. And I can't tell you how many kids at the upper level I've lost my mind on a little bit, watching them on deck, not paying attention to the pitcher, and talking with their buddies and the thing behind them or the cage behind them, really not getting ready to hit, and then go up there and having a poor at bat, or not being on time, being late on a fastball, taking a first pitch, or just putting together a terrible at bat because they didn't know how to be on deck. So that's also kind of the part when we're talking youth baseball. A lot of times I'm talking 12 and under, but when we're still talking 13, 14, 15, I'm still in my mind as youth baseball, right? Getting into high school. Those are some of the things too, is these kids don't know how to be on deck. And that translates for me into pitch selection, which you then talked about. Because one of the biggest fears for kids is, one, obviously striking out, but 2 is getting beat by fastball, right? No kid wants to come into the box and have a kid just blow a pitch right by him and look stupid, right? So but it happens. Then that's a huge fear. So what happens is, because kids have that fear, because they have no timing and they don't know where they need to be in their sequence to be on time, their fear is, well, I don't want to be late, or this kid's a good pitcher. And then it turns into, okay, well, he's going to throw me a strike. And now they're swinging before they've even identified if the pitch is a ball or a strike. And that's why you see kids swinging at pitches over their heads or in their dirt, or pitches that weren't even close. And the sad thing is, a lot of times you'll see that the swing is like they're swinging at a ball like it's right down the middle, and the pitch is 2 feet over their head or in the dirt. It's like they didn't even swing where the ball was at. They just swung out of the fact that I'm afraid this kid's going to throw a ball past me, and they didn't swing. They're not even swinging in any direction of where the ball is at. And again, I think that a lot of that has to come down to the fear of getting beat, the fear of being embarrassed, which is a big fear. I mean, right? They got their parents watching, they got the grandparents watching, they got the pressure of their parents and their dads. You need to be successful. You need to do all this stuff. And it's hard for these kids to go through. And of course, then on the flip side, just the youth, right? Their peers, right? Yep. Say a kid's not one of the better players on the team, right? He doesn't want to let the team down. He doesn't want to get made fun of. And unfortunately, you see a lot of that. And that's when you get these kids swinging at awful pitches, and their pitch selection is right out the window. And they're so afraid of making a mistake. What do? They make a mistake because they don't stick to what they've learned in practice. They don't stick to, hey, I need to make sure that I'm on time. I need to take active takes. And then when you do all of those things, you realize that when you're ready to hit and in a locked position, that you have more time to actually react than you think. You actually create time for your body to say, yes, I'm going, or I'm going to be on time. And then, no, I'm not going to swing at that because that's a bad pitch. But if you don't do all that stuff, the game speeds up on you and you're not ready, right? And preparedness is one of the biggest things in it. If you're not prepared or ready to go, or you don't have any type of a plan, or you don't know what to do when the ball is hit to you, the game speeds up on you really quick. And next thing you know, right, it's almost like you almost black out. You're like, oh, I didn't know what to do because you weren't ready. And then all of a sudden, like it all happened so quick, you weren't ready. But when you're prepared, and like when you're in the zone, and I'm sure you've been there too, when you're hitting, the game slows down for you. Ground balls slow down. No one can throw a pitch past you because in your mind, you're so prepared and so ready and so in the zone for everything being right. The game actually slows down and becomes easier to play. And I know you've experienced that because you played at a high level and played together for a long time. And you know exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about slowing the game down. But if you're not prepared and you're not ready, the game happens too quick. It really does.
And your advice is right in line with talking to the listeners about trying to, what we want to try to avoid. We don't want the game to speed up. So, okay, how do we reverse engineer that? Let's try to slow it down. Well, we can't technically slow the pitch down. That's not up to us. We can't make the distance of the mound further. But what can we do to perception of the game? It's almost a perception of the game slowing down. The hitter's perception is that it's going slower, and that's preparedness, being prepared on deck. I got this thought, the on deck circle with Little League. Why does everything have to be all or nothing? Why can't we put a screen out there? Why not just a regular screen, maybe 2 screens? Why does the on deck circle have to be eliminated? Why couldn't it just be a couple screens that would, for all intents and purposes, not let a hitter get?
And you would have the argument there would be a foul ball and a defensive player would run into a screen and then someone would get hurt. It's always, and I get it, children's safety is super high, right? Crazy important. I get it, right? But also sometimes at what point is the children's safety taken away from the ability to play the game how it was meant to be played and put these kids in a position to be successful, right? So maybe they have a spot maybe on the backside of the dugout, right? Or just outside the dugout. You've seen pit-like fields where they have the bullpen attached to the dugout. Well, what if they had a spot out there they could swing the bat and get their timing down away from everybody? But then Little League rules say Little League players can't leave the dugout, right? So I wish there was a way I'd just say, hey, let's maybe put the on-deck circle past third base and past first base to give these kids some time to react and get out of the way instead of having the on-deck circle 15 feet away. I understand that, right? Because on a Little League field, if you're doing 60-foot bases, maybe you're only 20 foot away from the hitter, right? So where you're on a 90-foot bases, 60, 70, 80 feet away from home plate. So maybe put the on-deck circles behind first base and third base down the line, just to give these kids an opportunity to at least get some swings in and get some timing down. And obviously, if they get hit by a ball out there, then obviously anything can happen, but at least they're in a position where they're a lot safer and protected.
There's definitely some middle ground. And your point about the on deck is interesting because I think a lot of hitters and coaches take the on deck time, if they're still lucky enough to have an on deck circle, they use that time to almost perfect their swing and warm up their body. But really the ideal thing, or the part of hitting, and the part that should be focused on, or the main purpose, sounds like what you're saying, is getting the timing down. And because that timing for each pitcher may be a little different. They might have a slower delivery, a faster delivery, a slide step. They might throw slower. They might throw harder. So let's say they have an on-deck circle to work with. What you're recommending, their main focus, don't worry so much about putting a donut on your bat or doing this, that, or the other, but it's about syncing your timing up with the pitcher. Would that be your main recommendation for the on-deck circle?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's really great to hear that, because you clarified it. So coaches are like, how do we leverage that on-deck circle and that time the best? There you go, coaches. It's all about timing right there. Everything else is gravy. And I always wonder this. You talked about how it is very embarrassing to have a fastball. Like, I think a lot of players think this and they don't verbalize it, and maybe they don't even share with their coach or their parents, but I think it is very embarrassing at all levels to get a fastball blown by you, especially a couple times or 3 times. I don't want to go too far off on this tangent, but I wonder, what do hitters fear more? Like, if you took 100 random hitters, do you fear getting hit by a pitch more, or do you fear having a fastball blown by you? I didn't fear getting hit by a pitch, but I was always like, I don't want to get this pitch blown by me. I get emails all the time, Nick, from parents or coaches that say, hey, I have this hitter, or my kid has a fear of getting hit by the pitch. And I get that, totally get that. But I also think the under-discussed fear is having a fastball or pitch blown by them, especially in front of their peers. So how can we help with that fear? Just tell them not to think about it. That doesn't work. Tell them to do some meditation. Good luck with that age. How about get them on time? How about practice their timing?
It's preparedness. Yeah. Like with anything in life, right? If you're prepared, whatever you do in life, then you'll feel more comfortable with whatever you're doing, right? If you're not prepared for whatever it is, job interview or presentation that you're given, and you just walk in there and you're not prepared, it's not going to go well. I mean, some people obviously have the natural ability to do that, but I mean, that's just with all parts of life. That's what is one of, just not even to get onto an outside tangent too, because you grew up in our world, and obviously the coaches that we had in high school, it wasn't just about baseball, right? Our coaches were teaching us how to be young men and contributors to society, and how to create work ethic to be what it is outside of just baseball. Because a lot of that stuff translates to putting that work in, being prepared, showing up on time, looking appropriate, all that stuff. And that translates into accountability, team players, working with people. And it translates into how do those young men become true young men in society. Because at some point, the baseball career ends, and then you have to go get a real job and be part of society. And one of the biggest things that I look back at all of the coaches that I had, it was more than just about baseball. It was, hey, like, we're going to teach you how to be men. We're going to teach you guys how to be successful in life outside of this, using the same tactics that we're going to use to be prepared for baseball. So like I said, that was, just a little off tangent, but you remember all the post-game meetings that we used to have with our coaches, and he would address us as men, even though we were in high school. We were men at that point, even though we were 18 or 16, 17, whatever we were addressed as men, and we were addressed as, you guys need to be the men in society. I look back at that, like, wow, man, all the way through high school to all of the colleges I've ever played for. The crazy thing, even though I played for a lot of schools, I was very fortunate where the culture of the coaches and how they approach things was very similar all the way throughout. And I was just extremely fortunate to have some of the most amazing coaches that I would never say a bad word against any of them. We've all run into coaches that have had different philosophies, but I've been very fortunate to have these coaches throughout my entire higher level that were all very like-minded.
That's one of the things we talk about so much here, Nick, using sports as a fun way, a vehicle, and almost disguise becoming a better adult, a better person in the long run, disguising it or wrapping it in this fun game known as baseball. All right, that wraps up part 1 of the interview. Part 2 coming to you next week. Next week, Nick is going to share out his key pitching tips for youth pitchers and youth coaches, including a discussion about what he thinks is the most important part of practice, and it's related to pitching, and what to say and what not to say to a pitcher in the middle of a game. And also, I will share out a strategy before we dive into part 2 next week that will help guide us to using our coaching and practice time more wisely. And before we dive into part 2 next week, I will share a strategy, which I think is a very helpful strategy that will help guide us to using our coaching and practice time more wisely, more effectively, and more successfully. So make sure to tune in next Tuesday when the next episode comes out. Until then, if you wouldn't mind, as soon as you're done with this podcast episode, if you could go leave a quick review. It should be pretty easy to do on your podcast app. I want to thank all of you that have done that. That really helps the podcast. And the best thing would be to share it with a friend of yours, a family member, somebody you know that's coaching or has a youth baseball player in their family. That would be an awesome way to support the podcast. And I would appreciate that very much. And until next week, let's take care of our health. Let's make sure we're getting enough rest each night. A rested, healthy, calm coach is always a lot more effective. Let's keep taking care of our families, and let's be there for those close friends of ours. Priorities, priorities, priorities. Keep the main things the main things. All right, everyone. Thanks for being a coach. This has been Coach Bo. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.